what do you think long term when we think about a fiat world and a Bitcoin world and how different those two paradigms are? And we already talked in the beginning how super early we are and how hard it is to imagine what actually is coming in the future. How do you think Bitcoin will in general impact companies, the startup world, the venture capital world, when the hurdle rate all of a sudden is Bitcoin and not fiat? So it's the hurdle rate is something appreciating and not depreciating with fiat.
They're not gonna be able to breathe. They're going to probably die. The old companies, the incumbents, and then there will be net new companies. This ties into our venture capital firm is called Early Riders, and the name stems from having to not only pitch and talk to the largest institutions in the world about holding keys in our multi-institution quorum, and some getting it, others not. But even if they got it, there's so much bureaucracy that exists that they may not be able to move fast enough. And also going deep down the rabbit hole, and looking at AI and realizing how disruptive it is, that these technologies are so disruptive that the incumbents will not be able to fully adopt or embrace them because they disrupt their whole business model, right? So there's that angle of the traditional company. Like you think about a large firm like Charles Schwab and the amount of individuals, like financial advisors are a great example because yes, financial advisors provide value in the same way travel agents provide value, but you don't need that many travel agents once the internet came about. It's the same way you're not going to need that many financial advisors. So those models they won't fully embrace it. And so they'll get left behind. It's very similar to like Blockbuster, Netflix. But then to take it a step further is when you think about traditional companies. And we talked about this on our last trade podcast with Tad Smith, where he was referencing at a certain point when a company is starting to adopt the Bitcoin treasury strategy, what they're effectively doing is incepting Bitcoin as the hurdle rate and almost like collapsing their business because either they are going to have to realize that every spend has to eventually net out more Bitcoin or not make the spend because you could just buy the Bitcoin with the cash flow. And so that kind of changes their model. But again, these companies aren't siloed. Like there's so much fat and bureaucracy and different, cross-functional groups. Like by the time that happens, what we're investing in and what we've done personally is I call it the carrot or stick. So let's pretend you, Robin, are at a big tech company, right? And you have a professional experience and you're a good employee. You're trying to help your manager or your founder, whoever you're working with, like see Bitcoin, like get this because it's going to help the company. And then by that notion, everyone listening knows that once you see Bitcoin, you start to see the world in a more efficient, dynamic way. It's kind of like seeing truth, right? That's where the food and all this stuff starts to come in as part of what we're doing. And you're like, look, we got to do this. We got to use AI. We got to like deal with this. And they're just like, nah, it's cool. Go back in your corner. And so that's your carrot. The carrot is you're trying to help them. And the stick is like, all right, I'm out. I got enough Bitcoin on my own personal balance sheet. I know where all the bodies are buried. And I'm going to go and I can see where other competitors' bodies are buried. And now I can infuse 2 or 3 things together. And I can rebuild what you guys built 10 to 100x faster at 1/10 to 1/100th of the cost. And not only that, I'm going to use a base level money, which is Bitcoin, and not only appreciates, but I'm going to sweep all my free cash flow. So while you are all suffering from margin compression and inflation, I'm going to be out competing you. And that's the definition of early riders. It's the early riders are going to rebuild this world in the way that you're describing. And that's who basically we're investing in and backing our companies or individuals that already grok this.
I also heard you talking about, I don't remember which podcast, but on another podcast talking about the real productivity measured with Bitcoin per employee, if I got that right. How do you look at that of like measuring everything in Bitcoin, like Bitcoin per share, Bitcoin per employee, Bitcoin per whatever?
Yeah, so I think directionally, a lot of this stuff, like right now in the corporate stuff, they're throwing these crazy like acronyms and things out that they're not really Bitcoin per anything. It's just paper because you don't own any Bitcoin. So they can say per Bitcoin per what's owned. But the real way I think about it is it just flips the models of the traditional world, right? So the traditional like technology or finance world is AUM in an investment fund, right? Like how much capital can you raise in a fund? How large is your fund? But when you think about that, it's actually going to be the opposite because the amount of capital you deployed or raised, people are going to back test and run into how much Bitcoin was that. And they're never going to be able to make that Bitcoin back. So when they could have just bought the Bitcoin and been fine, right? So it's people that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars will look at as negative in the future because you'll be like, well, did you return that amount of Bitcoin? So it kind of flips that. And in the same way, when you look at a company, the usual heuristic previously was like, oh, success is how large is your company? Like if you ever worked at a large company, they love being managers of 30, 50, your headcount is the thing. But in reality, and there's two paths converging. There's deflationary tech like AI. That's, everyone talks about the first person company that will build $1 billion business. But you tie that tailwind of AI and deflationary tech like software or SaaS in general, and then Bitcoin. And now you're going to look at the amount of revenue on BTC netted out per employee, like the amount that you can do. And like Tether's, I guess, a kind of a good example of this. But so yeah, it just kind of flips what you're looking at, because everyone's chasing the underlying BTC to make more of it. That'll be how people return. They think about their capital investing into a VC fund or investing directly into a Bitcoin company is how much Bitcoin are you returning to me? So yeah.
I love that. Like, how much Bitcoin profits are you doing per employee? Something like that. Really interesting. One more thing is interesting. With AI, because we talked about it a little bit now. I heard, I think it was Shopify, the CEO, who said, if you want to increase headcount at Shopify, a manager at Shopify, you now have to explain why AI couldn't do that. So like the reverse of that, like show me why we need an employee and not can just do it with AI, which makes it super interesting with what Jeff Booth is also talking about, the deflationary aspect of Bitcoin, and then the efficiency is rising with productivity and technology. What do you think is the AI impact on Bitcoin?
Yeah, AI and Bitcoin are fascinating. There's a lot there. To go back to what you were saying, I'll butcher this, but directionally it'll make sense, and I got to go figure out where. But basically, like, there's Metcalfe's law, which is uh, like squaring the connectivity. So Metcalfe invented Ethernet, and it was this notion that as you create more connectivity with computers, you are going to exponentially increase the amount of distribution. And I forget who did it, but it was basically recognizing when you infuse or like interject Metcalfe's law with Moore's law, right? So Metcalfe's law is distribution increase, Moore's law is decreasing of the capital cost for software, right? You're naturally going to open up uh, the internet. You're going to open up the ability to, like, think about SaaS and software and these large technology companies. And what's exciting about AI and Bitcoin is you're taking those two things and then you're just grafting on now a net new thing, which is like AI that is able to, like, AI. I think they're very similar in, like, AI is in this model is take those two, and those were huge for mental models of the technology boom, where Moore's law is AI. So Moore's law is reducing the cost for individuals and compute and the things that are needed to build. And then Metcalfe's law is Bitcoin, because now you're connected everyone to a digital native money, right? And so, like, you're combining that, and that's where, like, it's nobody's talking about this yet because it's still so early. But when you put all that together, and it ties to what you talked about earlier about, like, will companies look different, or how many more companies will have Bitcoin? It's like everything, because we haven't infused money into everything we do online, and it'll naturally be part of it, whether it's through commerce or interactions via, like, watching videos or streaming music. And so AI is interesting because um, it's a deep rabbit hole, whether it's the convergence of compute and power, right? When you think about, like, it's a hard one to talk about because I haven't fully wrapped my head around, but there's a very deep synergy happening with Bitcoin and AI and energy that will change. Like, if you go far enough down the rabbit hole, we talk with, like, Matt Pines, you can start to, like, make cases how Bitcoin was sent from the future to come back to self-regulate when it comes to energy, and basically us ending ourselves, because you have to pay AI, you have to pay the energy source. And if you have infinite money, meaning like CBDCs or stable coins or dollars, that ends up negative. But when you have a decentralized money that's completely different, that's self-regulating itself. And so there's an interesting, like, convergence there, but that's more of like a meta angle. Just in general, like, it makes complete sense. If you have AI that is natively on the internet, you need an internet form of money that's native to, whether it's payment or just to manage.
Yeah, I cannot imagine an AI agent having a bank account, but I can imagine them dealing with Bitcoin addresses and sending Bitcoins around AI agents to other AI agents.
Yeah, in the topography around Lightning and just in general routing, like that's a lot of stuff that you'll see where once the models and the understanding, and again, it's some of the best kind of like researchers when it comes to traditional AI models start to deeply understand Bitcoin and aren't thinking about crypto and looking at Lightning and topography there, how it maps to the general topography of the internet and networks. And then you infuse AI with Lightning and payments and build those different nodes. Like all of that's coming, but it actually probably is a lot sooner than we recognize because of how fast things are compounding when it comes from a technology perspective.
Absolutely. And now as a last topic, I'm really interested in what are you doing with OnRamp, and what are you kind of building there?
Yeah, so OnRamp is a pretty simple premise. My background for now a little over 5 years has been building Bitcoin infrastructure. I was, the journey was similar to a lot of individuals. You go down the rabbit hole, you start allocating small amounts, and ends up being most of your wealth into Bitcoin and had it on an exchange and realized I needed to get it off the exchange. This is back in like 2017, 18. And I was, as much as I got comfortable with hardware devices, I couldn't like risk putting all my money and being alone on an island here. I just couldn't get there. I credit a lot of people for doing it because this is where the majority of money still sits in Bitcoin on this device because Ledger has a majority of market share and then the majority of Bitcoin sits with individuals. And so I ended up going down the collaborative custody rabbit hole. I was an early client of an Unchained when they spun out from the loan product, and then became very friendly with Parker Lewis there and helped build that business. So I joined in, we were talking in 2019. I joined in 2020 because the market was volatile. And so really built that business from the ground up. We onboarded, thousands of people, billions of dollars. But while I was doing that, naturally spotted just this very large, significant gap, whether it was with high net worths all the way to corporates and fiduciaries, that at the end of the day, they just didn't want to hold these keys. They didn't want to hold them for a number of reasons, some of the wrong reasons, right? Like just because they could lose their car keys, when in reality, you can figure that out. But again, that ties back to, do you want to make money or do you want to be right? Because I could tell everyone should be holding their keys, but the reality is not everybody wants to be their bank, and that, nor should they, because if everyone was their bank, that opens up a lot of risk from like physical attack. That's why banks have existed. And once you get to, businesses, fiduciaries, people managing money for others, it's untenable to hold cryptographic material because you have seed phrases, you have hardware devices. Not only can you mess them up, but if somebody leaves the firm, now you have to burn a lot of this information because if they leave, they may have a piece of it, and now you start to expose yourself. And so that's really where this notion of multi-institution custody came out. And it's really simple. It leverages Bitcoin's native property multisig. It's open source and interoperable, but with the slight caveat that we use institutional grade custodians. So it's a difference between how a hardware key is generally stood up when you think about a Ledger, Cold Card, Trezor, where it's a direct one-to-one relationship, seed phrase, and hardware device. This is institutional grade. Key generation, where there's shards of a single key held by different institutions. But where this gets really elegant is the client, all of this is obfuscated. We got it down previously in my life at Unchained. It took 2 to 8 weeks to onboard people. I think it's faster now, but you still have to ship the devices. You have to onboard. You have to put the seed phrases, the wallet config file. You have to back them up. If you do it correctly, you should have it in 4 different locations. Most people don't have 4 different places. And then now, and something we've been a little quieter about because it sounds like FUD, but it makes logical sense. It was coming is the amount of physical attacks that are coming. And I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal had an article. I forgot what it was titled, but it was something to the tune of like crypto elite get their fingers chopped off because like people are now starting to get kidnapped because all the data is out there. This is also something that we didn't want to talk about. But the reality is every CRM has been hacked or will eventually be hacked because data is data. And in Coinbase instance, I think they were like selling the data, their employees to people. So all this data is out there. Now you have chain analysis and AI tools. You can pretty much discern almost any person's balance as great as their operational security was. Unless they were mining it or buying OTC in a back alley in 2010, you can pretty much figure out whose balance and what somebody holds. And so now everyone's exposed. And so this notion of multi-institution custody takes a lot of that out of the picture because you can onboard in minutes. You have three different independent institutions that are working on your behalf. So they're agents of the client, and the client directs them via video verification. And over time, we'll do it in person and have other kind of 3FA mechanisms to like authenticate. Because I know the natural question is like, well, what happens with AI? But the point being is it's all on-chain segregated. So it looks like a traditional brokerage account. You can go in, buy Bitcoin, get direct spot exposure, get an IRA, lending, everything you would want. But you're not worried about, if I travel, do I take my keys with me? Because if I bring them, I have a problem, right? But if I don't bring them, then I also have a problem because who's at my house? And so it just naturally allows for individuals not only to build more material positions, but just net new people not have to go through, do I buy an ETF? Do I buy a MicroStrategy? Do I do all this? It's like, no, you can just click a button. And I liken it to like the browser. You know, in 1995, Mosaic came out and it was the access to the World Wide Web. It opened up and democratized the ability for everybody on the planet Earth to get access to the world's information. That's how I think about what we're building here is everyone can get access to spot Bitcoin in a fault tolerant and redundant way.
How do you make right now you have to do a video verification when you make a transaction then?
Yeah, there's multiple with multiple different entities. So the way it's constructed is when you're onboarding, it takes a few minutes. You have a direct legal relationship with OnRamp, direct legal relationship with BitGo, and then our recovery partner. We have multiple institutions, so you don't even have to have OnRamp holding a key if you don't. Is CoinCover. Your two parties or your what we call active signers is when you go to do a withdrawal, you're going to book time with an on-ramp operations specialist. They're going to go through and it's a dynamic conversation. It's quick, but it's dynamic, meaning you're going to ask, you know, the time, the date, address, a bunch of information that can't be actually deep fake. Then ultimately, once that's completed, you're going to go to a second independent institution. This is where the real magic happens, is because you have a different entity in a different place, in different location with different responsibilities. And BitGo is one of the best in the business. They hold over $100 billion in assets. They mess something up, that's on them, right? That's their whole business model. And what's exciting about all this is we added actually Lloyd's of London up to $100 million policy on incidents as well, which is really exciting because that really hadn't been done. Insurance hadn't really been done correctly in the Bitcoin space. I can talk to you about that if you want, but it actually adds additional assurances from the common thing that came up was like collusion. Because most people's mental model, when you think about multi-sig, is like everyone's holding these devices. So me and Belshi have this device and we both click it if we want to collude, and then we just take people's assets. It's like, that's just not how it works. Institutional grade custody, you can't call Brian Armstrong and say like, hey, I want to move all of like Bitwise's ETF. Like it doesn't work like that. Even if you kidnapped him, he can't do it. There's controls in place. And so that's how this all works is there's institutional grade controls at each independent institution, and there's the video verification that just starts the process. And then there's still all the controls in the background before a key ceremony takes place.
Do you have something like where you can see where the Bitcoin is, like proof of reserve or something like that?
So I'm glad you brought that up because that is inherent to multi-institution custody. So proof of reserves in my mind is almost like a fallacy or window dressing because you can prove anybody's reserves. Let's forget about the liabilities aspect. If you have a central custodian that's doing proof of reserves and the next day they're hacked or their employees go rogue, well, what did it matter if the proof of reserves was there? Because it was there one day, they're not there the next. Inherent to multi-institution is every wallet is segregated. Every independent, we work with pensions, endowments, family offices, and the majority of our client base is people like me and you. Every wallet is verifiable, it's on chain. And then at the end of the day, it's inherently proof of reserves because you have the title to the Bitcoin and it's right there in your segregated wallet.
Interesting. I love that. The one thing I always say, people with self-custody, I love that there are already, because we're so early, already so many different options. And I'm just looking forward to like, how many different options will we have in like 10, 15 years? I'm because you brought also the point up earlier, like we have no clue what the greatest entrepreneurs are still coming in there. The greatest people will still come in people in Bitcoin and will build all those things. But I already feel like we have now so many different, interesting and great solutions. ranging from all sorts of angles. When we have things like OnRamp, we have collaborative custody. You said like Unchained, cars, and all those things. And then we have like, of course, the hardware wallets, but also like things like how's it called, the from Checkdos, the thing, the BitKey or something like that. So there's already so many different solutions out there for so many different use cases. For you, is like most of your customers, you said, is like individuals, so not corporations. Like most of your customers are actually individuals.
Yeah, well, there's two parts. One is we don't have to go deep in there, but I think that in 15 years, we'll look back at the way we custody Bitcoin today and be shocked. Because if you go 15 years from now and Bitcoin is $1 to $10 million, we'll be shocked that we let Coinbase hold that amount of money. And we'll also be shocked that we held that amount of money in a single hardware device or in a multi-sig, because the reality is people break into people's homes all day long for Rolex watches and small, things under $50,000. Once the bad actors realize that this stuff was in our house and we were self-custodying it, like the market's going to recognize, wait, that's crazy. That's not how I want it done. And so in 15 years, we'll look back at the existing models, and they won't make sense. Now, to your point about the client base, River has a really excellent chart. I could pull it up if you'd like, but ultimately it shows the ownership structure of Bitcoin. And it's something that most people don't really perceive. You hear about institutions coming in, and then you also hear about, Wall Street and generally big TradFi dictates, products and services. 70% of all the Bitcoin sits with individuals, right? So that makes sense. Like that's our largest client base because that's who holds material wealth and needs better Bitcoin custody. But then to your point, we work with the first UK pensions that adopted Bitcoin. We have endowments that we just onboarded, family offices, and corporates, businesses. But then again, that's like 30% of our business. And then the other 70% is the individual, because that's who holds the vast majority of the underlying asset.
Absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, it's like most people don't, especially outside of Bitcoin. I hear like, oh, like so many corporations own Bitcoin, or like big players own Bitcoin. And then you look at the numbers, like no, individuals, plebs own the most Bitcoin. Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here. Or here. Oh, maybe also here.